I turn off the sound so that we can get ready and prepare and stuff like that before, before we go live. So don't mind me every once in a while. I turn off the sound so that we can get ready and prepare and stuff like that before. All right. Yeah, that wasn't a loop. It was, I mean, technically it was a loop because we had, because I had it open, unbeknownst to me, in another room. Or not in another room, in another window. Yes, listen to Tiffany open her mail. This is why I mute the mic, guys. Because as we get ready, we're doing stuff. All right. You good? You look good. All right, I'm going to close that. Set that to away. Hey everybody, welcome to the Elseworlds Exchange. I am Sal.
And I'm Tiffany.
We're just getting ready for the show. I'm perplexed as to what the sounds are coming out from behind us. It sounds like either a plane or a space shuttle or some kind of ridiculous craft of some kind.
I don't know.
It was a little worrisome, that's all. Anyway, hi everybody. Today we're going to be talking about non-comic book readers. And the reason why this episode kind of came to me like a bolt of lightning was because of two instances that Tiffany and I had irrespective of each other. You had an interaction with non-comic book readers. I had an interaction with non-comic book readers. And more importantly, we have a show called Back Issues in which I explain comics to non-comic readers, or rather I explain them to two people who have no context for comics, but the original conceit was non-comic readers.
Right.
Ben will occasionally read comics when we tell him to for Off the Rack. Ethan still does not read any comics. So don't worry, we still keep the show pure.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and by the way, we're working on future episodes of Back Issues that will be like kind of specials that will, sorry to say, include comic book readers. But they will not have read the books that we're going to be discussing. So, Tiffany, why don't you share your experience? I'll tell my story, and then we'll kind of meet in the middle and talk about what the general conceit of this episode is going to be.
Okay. My experience was I actually work essentially in education, not as an educator.
Now, like me, you work in education. And like me, you found a lot of work outside of working in education.
Well, yeah, because everybody needs things to help run a school that isn't being an educator. So I am a part of a full-time employee, and I'm not a teacher employee, which means I'm a 12-month employee as opposed to a 10-month employee.
Yes.
But because I work for the school, they had a summer reading program that they were doing, and anyone can participate who works for the school.
Not just teachers and faculty, but also staff and administration types.
Exactly.
If you're the receptionist, if you had a book, you had a Jude Devereaux novel, you could make the students
I
read
think
it.
you have to get it approved.
Yeah, I think you do.
By the librarian. So I presented a book.
Yes.
And I was like, I want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a graphic novel. And I had seen that in the previous year's summer reading that they had done Watchmen.
Right.
And Dark Knight
Returns,
yeah.
Okay, so they've established a precedent.
Right.
You can do summer reading based on graphic novels.
Exactly.
As long as there's some elevated sense of...
Right. But I also knew that I thought I knew who the individuals were who had done those books. Turns out they were someone else. And actually, I've met both of those people, and they're not big comic book readers.
Right. Okay.
Which really blew my mind. Also, the summer reading, the kids can do it or not. There's no test. There's no essay.
Right,
This
it's
is
all
so-
volunteer.
it's just-
You're volunteering,
it's just
they're
you're-
volunteering. No
like,
one's getting paid
Right,
or
it's like,
graded.
It's essentially, it's like, you better be respectful and read this. But the thing they have to do is they have to go to a 1-hour discussion. In my opinion, you cannot discuss Watchmen or Dark Knight Returns with kids in an hour.
You can't possibly break down those books in an hour, especially if they've had an entire summer to read those books,
Right.
and then really get into them,
Right.
and then kind of be evaluated, not necessarily
Exactly.
evaluated, but like they to dissect it in a
Right.
group
I
setting.
mean, granted, it could introduce something, and that's cool. And I kind of thought that those people would do that again, because I thought it was kind of how that worked. I was wrong, and nobody chose those books, and I was like, that's kind of unfortunate, because that's still cool.
Right.
Or like another superhero book. So like I thought because that had already been represented, that I should pick something else. So I picked an Image book. Now a lot of people I saw were trying to guess what it was.
Yeah, they're like, Saga!
No.
You're not gonna do Saga!
I couldn't.
I mean, it is high
kidding
school,
me?
you could kind of do it, but no!
No, I couldn't.
You couldn't do, like, the opposite of war is fucking!
Well, here's the thing. Like, look, if a student came up to me and was like, I found this book, I'd be happy to talk to them about them. But I can't be like, here you go. I work in it's a more affluent area.
Right.
It's very one way or another kind of.
Yeah,
there.
black and white. Mm-hmm.
So I didn't feel like that was a thing I should do. So I selected I Kill Giants, by Joe Kelly. And I put it out there. I actually got a few kids to join. Only 15 kids can join per group. I had very tiny groups. I had like 3 kids for one, 4 kids for another. And that was it. And all they had to do was read the book, and we were going to talk about it.
Yeah.
And we sure did.
And I Kill Giants is, what, a 45-minute read?
It's a very quick read. I was like, this is going to be, like, I'm giving you a gift.
Yes. Here it is.
Here it is, kids.
Here's
for
the best thing
summer.
Joe Kelly's ever written.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, like, here. You don't have to read.
Yeah, you don't have to read
novel.
Great Expectations or some freaking dense tome like War and Peace
Exactly.
or Old Man in the Sea. It's a comic.
Exactly. And I thought that, again, I think I misread the whole situation. I thought I had to pick something that, like, they could relate to. So, this is about a preteen. Like, I picked something that I thought would really fit into the scope of what was going on.
Exactly.
And
They didn't go for it.
They didn't go for it. And we can get more into that, but I gotta tell you, it wasn't necessarily even the story.
No, that's the thing. It's that, as you described it to me...
It was the format. It was the medium. And that's what blew my mind. And the second group I had really got into that more so.
Right. The first group was interesting because...
Well, the first group was very interesting because I had 2 boys, 2 girls.
Okay.
The girls didn't care.
Right. Didn't care, didn't have any opinion.
Didn't opinion. Now, again, I have to tell you, these were high school freshmen.
Right, so
and
age
some sophomores.
14.
So, you know what I mean? Like, it's like they're not, they're working on learning how to analyze things. So it is like pulling teeth. But they really weren't interested. The 2 boys, a little more interested. One of the boys, way into it. But I felt bizarre singling him out, especially considering the vibe I was getting. Because I feel like the last thing you need to do
Yeah, if you're familiar with the book I Kill Giants, it's about loss, it's about alienation, and it's about like finding yourself and dealing with grief and anger and rage, and it's like it's a very deeply personal yet also incredibly approachable book.
Exactly.
And so for the student that you had who really seemed to connect with, it's not great in a group setting to be like, you seem to really like this book about alienation.
But not just that. You know what he really liked about it? Like, in a sense, I think he liked the fact that it was a comic.
Right. He was like, oh yeah, a comic.
And I think that he also like. The main character in that book plays D&D, and he was like, I've had experience with that. Every other kid I spoke with had no idea what it was.
Right.
One, I think, was like, I saw it on TV, and like tried to explain to me what it was, which was funny because he nailed down the fact that he's like, you roll a 20-sided die.
Right. Sometimes.
And I was like, okay. And he's like, and if you roll a 20, you kill the monster. I was like, that's a really interesting take on what D&D is.
Obviously, there's going to be a monster. There's going to be a 20-sided die, and you use the die to kill the monster.
And only if you roll a 20 do you kill it.
And that's how you win D&D.
Right.
And as anyone who's played D&D knows, the object of the game is to win.
So... But what I found out
was good for him for having an interest.
Right, had some... Like, that one kid was really into it, but that wasn't his take on it. He'd played it, like, once or twice. And
exactly.
I was like, cool, good for you, kid. Like, I'm not going to sing you out, especially based on the fact that everyone was like, I don't know.
Yeah. But you got an indication that your initial reaction to their group was that they probably didn't read it.
Right. The one did because he brought his book. The
guy
I don't mean
him. I mean,
right.
like, the
rest of the group
lack of interest.
Maybe?
The lack of interest you attributed to just a complete lack of doing any work.
Exactly. So, the second group, though, I gotta tell you, halfway through my hour with them, I found myself apparently researching this episode. Because the more they talked, again, that was the smaller group, the more I was like, wow, you just don't care for comics at all.
Right.
Because at one point I was like, let me ask you something, guys. Like, at this point I was like, done. I was like...
Right, we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of this book anymore.
I was pretty open about it. I was like it or not, like, I just, like, let's just talk about it. Like, what didn't you like? What did you like? What were you confused by? Because one kid out of the gate was like, I was confused. I couldn't read the panels, like, sometimes.
Okay.
He just couldn't figure it out.
And by the way...
And I was like, that's fair. That can indicate poor panel layout.
Yes, and also the art in I Kill Giants is not like traditional comics.
No, I guess
it's not Watchmen. It's not Dark Knight Returns even.
By the way, almost no one had a problem with the art.
Right. Well, they had a problem with the art only in a fundamental sense, where they were like, they had a problem with the fact that it was a comic book. Yeah, they're like, yeah, and I want you need to get into some quotes after you're done with your anecdotes. So go.
Yeah. So. No, let me just get into that quote, because that's my
favorite
quote. I want to
hear that quote, but I want to hear other quotes from other kids who had indicated what the experience was reading I Kill Giants.
A lot of the kids couldn't relate to it at all. They just simply, like, they couldn't understand the characters.
These are 14-year-olds. They're boys and girls.
Yeah.
In an affluent neighborhood. In an expensive school.
Exactly. So the bullying and loss they couldn't connect with. The bullying was interesting because the bully in the book is a physical bully.
Yes.
And they were like, that seems really old.
Right. That seems old school, which is hilarious because it's not. I'm here to tell you that, like, having been in high school in relatively short amount of time, physical bullies exist.
Quote, that seems something that would have happened 20 years ago. And I was like, interesting. And I didn't say this because...
Interesting that a 14-year-old knows what happened 20 years ago.
Well, I didn't want them to feel like they couldn't express anything to me. But to me, that seemed more a circumstance of the environment they're in.
Right. Yeah, they're like, my experience is not thus, therefore it is not relevant.
Right. So I was like, okay. And I just wanted them to keep talking.
Yes.
A lot of the people were okay with the ending. A lot of people, I asked them, I mentioned the fact that this book was being considered as a film.
Right.
Possibly. At one point or another, they were thinking about it. And I was like, what do you think, like, how do you think it plays off? Is it better, do you think, as a comic, or do you think it would be better as a film?
Yes.
And some people, like, were like, I kind of like it as a comic, and some people were like, I think certain things would play off better as a movie.
Right.
Like certain elements of the book.
Certain elements would have worked better.
One person said, I think it would be a better movie, but it would be really weird.
Okay.
Like, I heard a lot of, this was weird. I thought it was going to be a fiction book. I thought it was going to be...
Right, they thought it was... Like, they were like, I thought there were real giants in this book.
Right, okay. Now, let me tell you, on the docket for the rest of the summer reading, the majority, there were a lot of fiction books. There were 3 different people who had to lead discussions. Mm-hmm. So that's times 2. So that's 6 on American Sniper. So I thought that my book was kind of on the far end of like, oh, that's really out of reality. No,
yes.
had a conception going into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They thought that Barbara was weird.
Mm-hmm.
And unrelatable because of her interests.
Right.
And my favorite quote was, I asked them, this was the second group where I was just, at this point, I was just fascinated by what was happening because I am surrounded by people who at least have some interest in comics. And these kids were aware of movies.
Yes, then they were aware of superheroes because of movies.
So I thought that they would be a little more into this, right? But my favorite quote was, I asked them about comics. Like, what do you think of comics? Or would you just prefer a book?
Right.
And they all said, out of the second group, I would prefer a book.
Right.
Like, no pictures.
Yeah, they
just wanted paragraphs.
You indicated that they were also kind of turned off by the fact there were pictures, that it made them feel they were doing something juvenile.
I don't know if it was that. I think that they struggled with interpreting the work.
The work, yeah.
I think they have gotten used to, like, the idea that the author in a book, for the most part, because you can interpret a book. You can.
Yes. And here's the thing about fiction, about literary fiction, is that the words on the page create an image in your head that you imagine, and no one has the same experience.
Exactly, which is interesting because it requires you to have that much more going on. Like you have to be the one that creates the scenario, or like whatever things happen.
Yeah, technically, there's more cerebral activity going on.
Exactly, except the author often tells you how the character's feeling.
Right.
And I think they struggled with understanding the idea that they had to use clues from the images in conjunction with the words.
Right, they're used to interpreting one form of fiction.
Right.
But when you gave them something that they considered to be similar, but was in fact demonstrably different, it blew their minds.
Right.
Because, like, I'm used to analyzing a paragraph, but when there's no paragraph to analyze, but there's images of people, and I have to read their faces.
Right.
Or read the art and its depiction of their faces and the choices that were made. You know, they were talking about how it's be a better movie. More or less the exact same experience, only with a movie there's also sound and music and lighting and all this, like, and shot composition. It's like the movie is more or less handing you the feeling,
right?
And the comic book, you have to kind of search for it deeper.
Now, by the way, they had questions about it. There were things that they were like,
they're that close to polite. They were nice enough to ask you how it was going.
And in that the second group was less so. And like one of them was just like, when he said like he didn't like it. Like I'm sorry, there's another quote that's spectacular from this one kid, and I straight up congratulated him on his awesome, like on his honesty, on his complete honesty about what he said. And I wasn't sarcastic. I was like, I really appreciate your honesty here because I want you to feel like you can be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I started the whole discussion with what their expectations were going into it, and then I finished it with, how did you feel after you read it? Yeah. And like a couple who were like, it was fine.
Right. No one said that it was insightful or blew their mind.
Right, and I honestly didn't expect that.
You were not expecting that.
I wasn't expecting that.
So we weren't disappointed.
This one kid though, he said, I felt like I was done with half of my summer reading.
Right.
And I seriously wanted to shake that kid's hand because...
And then shake his head off his shoulders.
Right, but at the same time, I'm like, you should always be this honest.
Right.
Like, that is true honesty.
Yeah.
You weren't trying to fool anyone.
No.
That was just it.
But it also is a real dick thing to say.
It is a dick thing to say, but I appreciated...
That'd be like saying, what'd you think of Thanksgiving dinner? And he's like, I think that I'm finally finished with eating your terrible food.
That would be like saying, I'm full.
Yeah. Or, well, no, like, this holiday is now over.
Right. But... I was just truly surprised. Now, part of me thought, like, after the fact, I was, like, reflecting on what happened. I was like, perhaps the topic I chose was too intensive. However, there was a blurb about it put up when they got to look at the book. So they knew what it was about. They knew what it was about going into it. So part of me feels like they chose this, a lot of them. I think the one kid chose it because he was legitimately interested. I think the others chose it probably because of the fact that it was easy.
Yes. They were like, ooh, that a comic book that's this thick, that'll be really quick to read.
And, like, it's sad, but I feel like no matter what book I selected, no matter what comic I selected, I don't think that they would have come away thinking positively about comics because I think they already have... like ideas in their head about what reading is.
Right.
And that's it.
Well, and here's the thing, okay? Because it's the constant struggle that we have as educators, and it's the constant struggle that we have as comic book fans, and it's the same struggle but on two different sides, or in two different genres. You can't hand someone something that is transcendental and important and expect them to come away with true meaning.
Right.
You need, and that's because you need to break away stigma, you have to break away preconceived ideas and upbringing and cultural norms and memes and values, and you have to break through those barriers in order to reach an open-minded assessment of the work.
Mm-hmm.
And so as such, you're in a constant uphill battle because it should be as simple as, this is really good. We experience it all the time. When we do the show Off the Rack, we'll be like, we'll talk about a book that's pretty good, and we'll say, we think you should buy this or read it. And for the most part, our audience is like, yes, or no. And when they say no, it's because either that it's not their cup of tea, or it's because of the things we mentioned, where it's like they have a barrier of expectations and experiences that preclude them from digging deeper. But for the most part, because we're all on the same wavelength, we're all watching a comic book show.
Yes.
The work to chip through that barrier is lessened, or the barrier itself is thinner than if it were than if you're in a classroom setting. But even if you're in a classroom setting, you are signing a contract, even just by walking through the door, because no one's forcing you to go through that door. You're signing a contract that says, I'm here because I accept the fact that everyone in this room is trying to either teach or learn. And even if that's not true, even if you have a bad teacher or you have a classroom of apathetic students, you're signing a contract that says, I'm in a learning room now. You know, like, you should not expect when you walk into a classroom to be handed ice cream, because you're not in an ice cream parlor, you're in a classroom. And so even when you're walking through that door, the barrier should be a little thinner, because you're in a different mindset and you're in a different environment. When you were the odds were stacked against you from the get-go.
And I knew that.
For a number of reasons. One being, you're not an educator. Two being, you were not in a classroom setting. Three, they told them that the work didn't matter. And even though they didn't say that, they weren't like, it's a comic book, it doesn't matter. They said they weren't going to be assessed, they didn't have to read it, they weren't going to be graded. They ascribed no value to not just the comic book, but to the assignment as a whole. But that barrier I was discussing is what informs the problem with trying to get non-comic readers into comic books.
Exactly. And I got to tell you, I want to tack on one last thing because I want to hear your version, because we definitely have to keep
a similar thing,
But when I suggested this book, they wanted to pair me with a student leader, and the first one they paired me with, she already had a book that she wanted to do in mind. They gave her the book I wanted to do. And she may have read it or not. Who knows? She just was like, I didn't like it, I want to do this.
But she had an idea of what she wanted to do.
And essentially, like, the book she wanted to do, I was like, I'm not prepared to assist you with that. Like, that's not my area of expertise. Like, I am not an English teacher. You know, like, I know comic books and I can take you through a guided lesson on that. But I can't take you through a lesson on, I think she wanted to do, I can't remember what you wanted to do.
Was it was a novel, I assume, like a contemporary novel?
Yeah, it was something like that, or it was like I don't remember.
But it was something.
It was something that I was
something
like,
topical.
I don't. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was just I was very honest with the librarian. I was like,
I can't.
You need to pair her with someone who can actually assist her with this. And that's not me.
Well, you're like, look, I ain't the teacher.
Yeah.
You know, I got the fact that you're even involved in this is kind of remarkable.
The second student, this girl, she loved the book.
Oh.
She loved it. She had questions. She wanted to know more, and she unfortunately left the school.
She moved on to greener pastures.
She moved.
Yeah.
She moved, and they were like, "Oh, now you'll just be in charge. Are you okay with that?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine with that."
Yeah, but that's too bad.
But it's funny that one person in my group was into it, and then one person who was supposed to be there was really into it. Yes. But that's a much smaller percentage than every student I introduced this to.
Yeah, that's 2 out of like 15.
Exactly.
So, no.
So
My experience was not similar in any respect. When I go pick up packages for Letters Page, I go to my local post office, and I can't just take the packages out. I got to give them a ticket in order to get the package. The 2 weeks ago or so, I gave them my ticket, and the mail carrier there was like, "Why are you getting all these free things?" And I was like, "Oh, we have this YouTube channel, and we talk about comic books." Or no, I said we have this YouTube channel, and then she was like, "Oh, what do you guys talk about?" And I'm like, "Oh, we talk about comic books." And she's like, "And people give you things?" And I'm like, "Well, they want us to like to read them, and they're very excited about the show, and they want to be involved." And she was like, "Well, that sounds awesome. Like, what's the name of it?" All right, no, she goes, "Your guys are ComicPOP?" Because every week now she sees a stack of stuff that says our name on it, and so she's like, "You guys are ComicPOP? I'm gonna watch what you guys do." And I go, "Okay." And so today I went in and picked up another package, and she was like, "Hey, ComicPOP, I tried to show my daughter some of your work, and quickly realized that this is not for her because of our language." And I said, "Oh yeah, sorry about that. Not all of our work has hardcore cursing in it, but
Some of it does.
but a lot of it does, especially back issues if you catch that." And she goes, but her daughter said, "Shouldn't they not be cursing because this is for children?"
Interesting.
Because we were a comic book channel, ergo we're a kids network.
Right.
And she's a child who probably watches children programming. This is, I know this doesn't speak for everybody. I'm sure there's lots of children who watch C-SPAN, but I'm saying that this child probably watches Nickelodeon, Disney XD, and if she watches Disney XD, then she is inundated with superheroes.
Right.
Which means that if she has any passing interest in superheroes, she is going to go to a comic book store, or more likely a Barnes & Noble, if there's one even open anymore, or a bookstore in some way in the mall, and find a comic book, and then find out how demonstrably not for children comic books are. But also, like, that's not necessarily true. Comics are, in my opinion, comic books are for everybody.
Yes.
But this little girl had a stigma about comic books that was one I thought we had outgrown, ironically enough. No. And it was that comics are for children, and therefore, when you discuss comics, you should be talking about them on a childish level, or on a level that is one-on-one with children. And I thought that was kind of remarkable, and I thought it kind of was intertwined with your issue, where you're dealing with non-comic readers, I'm dealing with children, and the children are like, have the same like open-mindedness as non-comic book readers, which is to say they think that it's one thing, or they think that comic books should fit into one box, and it's the higher cultures box, and it's like, no. And I think that if you are a comic book fan, or if you're a fan of anything, when you're in any genre, if you are outside of if you encounter someone outside of the genre, they're not going to have nearly as much of an intimate understanding of that genre than you. But I think that when we deal with geek culture, and particularly comic books, we've always had kind of an uphill battle when it came to trying to break through that barrier I spoke of earlier, to reach people on some kind of like intellectual level or some kind of cultural level.
Right.
Because like, you can't just say, "Here's a comic book, read it," because they've had, I don't know, 60, 70 years of experience. And I don't mean comic books have only been around for 50, 60 years. I mean, just comic books have been under fire since at least the 50s for being not only for... It's ironic because comic books have been accused of being kid stuff and corruptors of children.
Yes.
So you can't have both, but it's hilarious to see that detractors will try to put comics into one of two categories.
Right.
But it's interesting because I thought that experience is here's where like pseudo intelligentsia but adolescent intelligentsia approach comic books from an outsider's perspective.
Yes.
And here is like a kid.
Yeah.
And they're a female kid, actually. And I don't think it matters, but I think it's interesting to note that this young girl was not only aware of superheroes, she wanted to find more of them, and she was shocked by the lack of childishness that was associated with them.
Yeah.
But that she thought that we were confused. That was the thing, that the mother and the daughter thought that like we didn't understand the subject we were talking about. They were like, "You're doing it wrong because this is something else."
Right.
And that's kind of interesting. And I don't even think they're wrong necessarily. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I think that they are they're misunderstanding the whole conceit. But I am saying that it's interesting at the very least. It raises an interesting discussion.
Right, which is where we are.
Which is where we are now. And the thing is, like, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I made a little cheat sheet of things that I wanted to bring up.
Oh, great. Well,
and perception.
Yes,
perception. I
think
was definitely one of my number one on my list.
Totally.
So I totally agree that the people think they're either for kids, or I've also heard people call them picture books for adults.
Yes.
Which is, to me, that's worse, I feel like.
Right.
Because that excludes story entirely.
Yes, that it's like...
It excludes plot. It excludes character development.
Right.
Granted, you can have books that have no words in it and they can still be very effective. That is not what they are saying when they say
they're
that.
saying, like, that they're taking a thing that is meant for babies and saying that, like, that if you have a childish mentality or a immature sensibility...
Yes.
And you don't read a novel, you'll read a comic book instead. I had an experience in grad school in which I encountered a girl who said out loud in a discussion about we were in an education class and we were talking about teaching, and she has probably been a teacher for a long time now.
Oh.
And she said that if an adult reads a comic book, or if an adult is a fan of and reads comic books, then they must be a pedophile. What? That is a direct quote, and I, like, kind of chipped at her a little bit, not like in a what the fuck did you say, like in a like pedophiles, like you just jump right to pedophiles, like why pedophiles specifically? And she was just like, well, because comic books are for children, and if they're reading them, then it means that they're trying to, like, be places where kids are, and they're trying to lure them into, and, like, they're trying to use ammunition to get children into their clutches. And I'm like, that's the most fucked up thing I've ever heard in my life. I didn't get there right away, but it took me a while, but I did eventually wrap up with, like, well, that is probably the most fucked up thing I've ever heard in my goddamn life. And she was like, well, I mean, I don't mean, like, specifically you, I just mean, and I go, isn't the fact that, like, you know that I, like, whatever. So, but that blew my mind in as much as
wow.
that was a culture shock for me, because the further and further we go into comic book discussions and culture, you know, and the larger that comic book culture becomes ingrained into the zeitgeist, even though it kind of already has been, like, Batman 66, people are like, why don't you like Batman 66?
Whoa. Okay.
I don't like it because it, like, kind of, like, wrecked Batman for a while, even then, like,
I understand what you mean.
Even then it brought people into Batman, you know? Like, even then it got people interested, but it made Batman part of the culture.
Right.
Or it continued, or it cemented Batman in further pop culture from 1966 onward. But, like, my point is that comic books have been part of the culture forever.
Yes.
Because children will not even realize they're putting a towel around their neck and putting their hands on their hips and being Superman, but they are, it's part of the culture.
Because also on my list is talking about the movies, and since you're talking about culture, we might as well talk about
the movies.
The movies, especially in today's
past, billion-dollar industries,
6-7 years, right?
And Hollywood people like Mel Gibson are bitching and moaning about it.
Well, hang on. That's what I think is interesting is. Like, when I talk to the kids about it, I talk to them about, like, clearly you've seen the movies and blah, 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 right? And then I realize that they may not think about them as comic book movies because they're billed as superhero movies.
Right.
Which to us is like, duh.
Yes.
Like,
but...
duh.
Yeah, like, if you think that, like, where the hell do you think they come from?
Well, where does anything come from? You know what I mean? Like, that's, to them, it's like, what...
Well, they don't think that far. They're
right.
just like, superhero movies now.
That's it. It's a superhero movie. It's not a comic book movie.
Yeah.
You know?
No, they used to be called comic book movies, in fact, like, way before. Like, somewhere between Batman and Robin and, I want to say, probably the first Iron Man movie. Mm-hmm. They were called comic book movies.
Right.
And I remember lists being generated by, like, news outlets, like Entertainment Weekly, but, like, popular culture magazines and articles talking about comic book movies. And they were like, did you know that Road to Perdition is a comic book movie?
Right.
Like, did you know that, like, Tank Girl was actually based off a comic book? And it's interesting because at some point or another, you know, like, History of Violence was a comic book movie.
Right.
But the producers and studios that are making those movies, they like the fact that that's a property that they know has a built-in audience that they can farm, but they also don't like the stigma that's attached to them, so they disassociate the comic book from the movie.
Right.
And so I think that was actually like a conscious decision by by studios and such to be like, no, if you gotta call them anything, call them a superhero movie. And if it's not like 30 Days a Night, just call it what it is. Like just to avoid it entirely, and we'll put all the comic book shit into the DVD.
Yeah, like who
cares? Like we'll make a little making of featurette, and like fucking. The worst example, of course, as we know, is Cowboys and Aliens, and how they just completely outright abused the comic book system and had zero respect for the medium, just so they could get their stupid script made. Which is, by the way, the same thing as 30 Days a Night.
Yeah.
30 Days a Night with Steve Niles had a script about fucking vampires in Alaska, and nobody wanted to make it because it sounded like a dumb idea. So then he hired a writer or an artist and drew the damn thing.
Right.
And it's a cool concept, and it sold like gangbusters. And then he actually wound up getting more creative control over the movie than he ever would have if he had sold the damn thing in the first place.
Right.
So but it's also just an avenue for him to just sell his script.
Yep.
And it's frustrating when that happens, but it's also like, I don't know. I get it. It's like. On one hand, you want to congratulate them for figuring out a way in, but at the other time, like, fuck you.
Right. But I think that's like, again, that was just one of those things that I realized when I was talking to them about, like they may not.
They don't even know.
They don't associate that.
No, they don't even recognize that, like, Iron Man is a comic book.
Right. They don't recognize the fact that, like, Superman's long legacy, like the amount of years, like the time that he's been around, the number of volumes, tomes that have been written about him.
You know what's so funny about Superman? It's that Superman has had like 80 years worth of comic books written about him. No movie that he's ever been in was based off one.
Right.
A single one. And when I say based off, I mean, like, yes. Does Lex Luthor appear in primarily most of them?
Right.
Yes. But, like, for the most part, these the stewards of the culture in movies were like, okay, well we'll take your character and we'll tell our own story.
Yeah, exactly.
We know better.
So then it's a movie.
And then it's a movie, and like, Superman, you will believe a man can fly. That's a cool concept, and it's just wow. And you know what? Direct result, like the Chris Reeve Superman costume, perfect example of what the costume looks like, and they get the origin pretty much right.
Right.
But the story, the structure, the plot of the movie. No.
Right? So, but, like, to me, that takes Superman and it separates him from his comics.
It turns him
into just a pop culture icon.
He turns into a cultural icon.
And then the only thing you can point to that is in the movies are the cartoons, which automatically makes them for children.
Exactly. And what's ironic about that is that, like, the best adaptation of Batman that has ever existed is Batman the Animated Series, which, by the way, is more or less also their own interpretation of comics.
Yes.
Are there images from the comics? Are there all ideas from the comics? Absolutely. The Joker fish, that whole episode is an idea from the comics. But for the most part, they reinvented the wheel, and in a better way. Like, Mr. Freeze has never been better before or since Heart of Ice. Like, he has 2 good episodes about Mr. Freeze, and they're perfect. But that's a rarity. Yeah. It's why people like me still go, Batman the Animated Series, best thing ever, because it's a diamond in the rough. It's one of those examples where stewards of our culture go, I'm going to take your thing and I'm going to elevate it, or I'm going to do something different with it. And that's cool, but it's still irrespective of comics and them permeating the culture.
Yes.
But it does go a long way towards legitimizing them, which frustrates me to say that. I hated it, but it's something that we've been saying as comic book fans for a long time. How can we legitimize comic books, or like, can comic books be legitimate? They already are. The fact that they're a cultural form of art already legitimizes them, and it's frustrating that, like, as fans, some of us seek to have them legitimized. It's frustrating that non-fans hope or don't expect them to be legitimate, or don't see them as legitimate. But it's just all part of that barrier, that disconnect between the people who are within the comic book culture and those outside of it.
Yes.
But by the way, Batman the Animated Series, like, it's hard to say, like, when forever, up until past Batman Begins, people would be like, "What's your favorite Batman movie?" And I go, "Mask of the Phantasm."
Yes, you would.
And they would go, "That's a cartoon movie. That doesn't count." And I'm like, "Go blow yourself. It certainly does count. It's actually better than the last 4 Batman movies." And they're like, "I don't believe that." And they, and that's trying to, well, what if I told you that the concept is this? It's actually about Batman finding out who he is and being in love and, all this stuff. And it's about crime and it's about, the mob and shit. And they go, "Well, that sounds like," and you know what's funny? Like, even if some of it might have permeated into their brains, their disassociation with comics and their problem or their misunderstanding of the genre twists it and contorts it into like, well, that just sounds like someone playing pretend. That sounds like someone who's trying to approximate something legitimate.
You know what's funny about what you just said? You said the word genre, and I found myself flip-flopping when I was talking to them about it, because I was like, comics are a medium.
Right. They're a medium.
Through which any genre can be told.
Exactly.
And yet we talk about the comic book genre often.
It's not. Yeah, I misspoke, I should say.
No, you didn't misspeak, because I've done that myself.
Yeah.
But I think that like when we do that, we kind of pigeonhole it.
Yes.
Because comic books can carry and convey any genre.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can have horror, supernatural, you can have a love story, you can have a dramatic
slice of life, anything.
Anything can come from that.
Yep.
And I think that plenty of people do that, though.
Yes.
Like, and I think that we should start trying to not, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
like,
so calling it a, I think calling it a medium is definitely a step in the right direction.
Right?
Because you're like, okay, this is like film.
Mm-hmm.
Literature, which is hilarious. Film, you shoot the thing, you cut it, you got sound maybe, and video, and you put it out. That's kind of a thing that you can say that's what it is. Literature, what is literature? Magazines, books, novels, poems, scraps of paper, newspapers, like anything written is considered literature. It's a huge umbrella. Comics are associated. It's interesting how they are kind of like a bridge between the film and the literature, where it's like they well, are they stories? They use words. Like, but are they a visual medium? Because they use pictures.
Yeah.
And then and it's interesting how even that medium has played with itself.
Right.
Not to get too filthy about it, but where they go like, okay, where they play with panel composition, where they play with balloons and how those are interpreted. Like with Sandman, where it's the Sandman only, like, he doesn't speak in capitals like comic books do.
Right. May I tell you that stuff apparently baffles people.
Oh, I believe it, and it should. It's supposed to. That's the idea.
But hang on, in a way that, like, I was a little concerned. Like, in I Kill Giants, there are a couple of word balloons in which the letterer, by instruction of the author, has like the words scribbled out.
Right.
Like, it's like not like they're redacted, but like,
no, but they are. They're like, they're trying to,
and it's intentional.
Yes.
And no one understood it.
Which is amazing, because there's a strike through option when you post on Reddit.
Right?
There's a strike-through option when you write in Word.
No, they couldn't understand why it was done.
No, but I'm saying, like, when you, like...
Right.
I've seen articles written in which they've done the strike-through, so you can still read it, but you recognize that they've omitted it or altered it or edited it. And it's the same damn thing.
It is. This one, they couldn't read it. You can't read it at all.
No, but you
use context clues to figure it out, and they just didn't understand.
That's a problem with, like, humanity.
It is and it isn't. I think that I think the mindset going into it, like what their expectations were of the book, was of the genre, like the fact that they weren't reading a regular book. I think at that point they had already checked out, in a sense. Like, they didn't want to put the effort in.
Well, it's funny where they go like, I gotta read a comic book. If you start anything from that perspective, your best friend's like, you gotta watch this movie. I gotta watch this movie. Yeah. You're gonna find things wrong with it. You're gonna look for a reason not to like it.
By the way, when I revealed what it was, there was no, like, light bulb.
No, that it didn't. Yeah, it didn't.
I think it perplexed them. My interest.
Yeah, they're like, why do
my
you?
Intense interest.
But I have respect for you.
Maybe.
No, but I'm saying. Like, but you're an authoritative figure. You're an adult who should know what is good and what is not for children and what is silly kid stuff. And it's baffling to me. And I think it was baffling to that lady who worked at the post office. It's baffling to that girl in class. It's the idea of the stigma of comics and people's rabid association. But I have respect for you.
Right.
But I thought you were mature. When I was in high school, I encountered that constantly. People being like, "This is like I was out of comics by that point.
Right.
I had stepped away from comic books for a while, and during high school, I did not read them. I stayed away from them because I was like, I was in a weird place where I was like, were comics that betrayed me. Spawn got really stupid. We got stupid, but like to me, Spawn got stupid, and the Clone Saga had like destroyed me. So I was like, oh well, it's all bullshit. Like I got Alan Moore for a second. I'm like, well, it's all bullshit anyway. And my interest started gravitating towards movies, and I was like, cinema's high art. That's where I can really get my creative juices flowing. But whenever someone would speak unfavorably about comics, I was always very defensive.
You're like, no.
I was like, no. I remember there was a debate about who would win in a fight. It was in my my publications office at high school. Who would win in a fight, Batman or Superman? I go, Batman. And they're like, oh, fucking wrong. Superman, you fucking comes from the Krypton.
Well, why even ask the question then?
Yeah, and I go, yeah, what is this? And I go, no, Batman would undisputedly win. He has won before. And they're like, when? In what comic? And I'm like, Dark Knight Returns. It's Batman is smart enough. And they're like, Batman's not smart enough. He's just a goofy idiot in a bat costume. And I'm like, he's a brilliant detective. He has access to kryptonite. He's a strategist. Superman, and this is of course a Frank Miller approach, but when you're a teenager, you're like, Frank Miller's the awesomest, coolest guy ever. And Superman's just a big jackbooted thug who works for Reagan. But like, in that context, you're like, no, Batman would win, and then I would draw upon a decade and a half's worth of information, of knowledge to be like, well, you're wrong, and here's why. And they were like, but whoa, I didn't know you were a nerd. We had a comment the other day on Back Issues where they were like, I tried to watch I got halfway through your episode, and I just can't get over how nerdy this is. And I'm like, you're on a fucking comic book channel, man! What the fuck do you think this is?
I know, every time you think you're past it, we're not past it.
But it's like, what are you, 8 years old? What's a nerd?
Right.
It's like that moment in The Simpsons. If you haven't watched it, definitely check it out, when Homer goes to college, where Homer arrives at college and he sees a kid who's in college with glasses and braces, and he has like a button-up shirt. And Homer just gets out of the car and goes, nerd! And Homer's like, and Marge's like, don't do that. And he's like, no, I'm a jock, and it's my jock to give nerds a hard time. And then a larger gentleman in a Varsity Letterman jacket comes by, and Homer goes, hey man, did you get a load of the nerd? And he's like, excuse me? Because like, we're in a world where like, what? What is the matter with you? Why are we drawing these distinctions? And it's because I need to draw these distinctions. And it's like, for a high school student who's like, who is being handed a comic book that directly challenges their perception of loss and anger and comic books and fiction and art and writing and literature, it's all, I think it was almost too much.
I think it was.
I don't think that you did wrong. I think because they should be challenged.
Yeah.
I think you actually...
tell you, this school prides themselves on their writing and reading.
Yes. And they were like, this is stupid because it's not it's not a book about, having acid thrown in your face in a Middle Eastern country.
Yeah.
You know what? You did right in what you did. Because here's what happens. They are going to encounter a Walt Flanagan type one day. Someone whom they respect and whose respect they would like.
Yeah. And
they will try, as many of us do, to put someone else or something else down to prop ourselves back up. And they will be, and that thing that they wish to knock down will in fact be on their knees, crouched behind them, so they can be pushed over them by the perceptions of the person whose respect they want. It's going to be fantastic to see. Unfortunately, none of us will ever see it.
No, exactly.
And it won't even happen. It won't even happen in a way where they're like, "You blew my mind, and I'm fucking changed forever."
Right.
They might be deeply hurt that you challenged their perceptions and that you assaulted their self-esteem. But there's a little. You will have created a crack in the barrier.
I hope so.
Because, would you mind answering that really quick? we have a landline for no reason. It's fantastic. But you will have cracked the barrier a little bit, because they will do that one day. They're going to be like, I read a comic book one time. It was called I Killed Giants. Like, I Killed Giants helped me get over the death of my father.
Right.
And they'll be like, what?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I Killed Giants is about loss and loss.
And let me tell you, I left them, and I like to think the thing that we'll remember is the final message of that book.
Yes.
Which is, you are stronger than you think.
Right. And that's the whole message of the movie.
And I echoed that every single time. So I think there will be a moment in their lives.
Yes. Well, even if, like, let's say that they're in a situation that's not unlike Barbara's.
Right.
Where they are faced with insurmountable odds, and they're faced with insurmountable grief and frustration, where they are losing a loved one. and they will have an image in their head of a giant in the ocean.
Right.
And they will think to themselves, why did I think of that?
Yep.
And either they'll cross that bridge or they won't.
Or
And
not. Who knows?
that's what happens whenever you hand anybody the keys to the new world. Like
Right?
they're either
You
gonna take
don't
them and
know what's
go, or
gonna
they're gonna
happen.
drop them and move back in with their parents. Like this is the divide, and it's the constant struggle that we have as comic book fans. We can't just be fans. We can't just be, we're arbiters of our culture, and we need to represent it in the best way possible. It's why it's so frustrating, when, like as a gamer, to see like that kind of like the negative culture perpetuate. And there's already a negative stigma for gamers and for video gaming, even though it's become a $1 billion industry. And it's permeated every aspect of our culture. It's literally everywhere. There's comic books about video games, movies about video games, novels about video games, movies being made about those novels.
Yep.
Like, video games are culturally significant and part of it, and they are inexorably tied. And yet, people are like, gamers are misogynists and like death threat enthusiasts and like basement dwellers who drink Monster energy drinks. Like, and it is frustrating when like three out of like when a statistical like 3 people are ruining it for the 10 of us.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's such with comic books as well. It's such with anything. I mean, like, you look at literature and you think of like someone who's like a literary critic, and you think of pretension and arrogance and elusiveness in discussion, and it's like, not everybody who likes books and reading is a pretentious jackass. Not everybody who knows art is also has their head up their ass and enjoys a variety of cheeses from different places in the country. Like, it is like, we just gotta like, everybody. Here's the thing: we're not under fire.
No.
As much as we think we are.
Right.
We are not, and everyone is on the same level. Like, everyone is fighting for their culture. So whenever you feel like, I'm trying to get to these non-comic readers and I just don't get it, like, they're fighting their own battles. They're an accountant and they're trying to fix the perception that they're boring.
Yep.
It's like, all these things are valuable and vital to our culture, and we all are arbiters, and if we all represent them in the best way possible, then then greater understanding can be achieved.
Absolutely.
What else do you have on your list?
I have 2 more things on my list.
All right.
I had this thought that the printing, the manner in which comics are printed can be difficult to grasp on both ways. Because while the trade is easy to understand, if you pick up a trade of a superhero book, right? If you pick up a Batman Superman book, right? A lot of them are standalone. Yeah. But it's a lot of backstory that is included in that or not included with that. Right. There are things that have already been established and you're just handed this book. Yes. Right? Which a novel typically, unless you're in the middle of a series, and you're in the middle of a series, like, has everything included in it. It's a nice package, here you go, bam, done, right? It's much longer, of course, right? Yeah. And then you have the floppy, which must be baffling to most people currently. Yes. Right? In a world of like, I need it right now, you're going to have to wait every month for the next issue to come out.
For 14 minutes of reading.
Exactly. So I can imagine that must be, for a non-comic reader, that's confusing as hell.
But it's easily relatable and transferable if you say, like, well, what about waiting a week for TV shows?
Right, exactly. But that's a week still.
Yes.
But in the world of people saying that TV is fading in a sense, and Netflix is there. Yeah. Netflix binging. Yeah. You know what I mean? Which is essentially kind of like reading a trade.
That's what you're waiting.
Except the show has all the information you need in it.
Right. Right. The show.
And the trade may not. Now, which is why I went with I Kill Giants. It's a standalone book.
It's self-contained.
It's self-contained. Everything you need to know about it is right in there. Yeah. But I could imagine, that could still be something you have to get over.
Oh, yeah.
Like, while there are plenty of standalone superhero stories, you kind of have to have some knowledge, which I guess is why they always are putting origins into things.
Yeah, well, and why origin self-contained graphic novels sell the best.
Right, which, like, I've always been like, I don't understand why you have to do that, because I agree with you. Like, we've done it, we've seen it a million times. And then I ran into these kids, and I was immediately like, oh, right. It was incredibly sobering.
Yes, and that's the thing, is that any great participant of your culture, you should always step out of it for a little while and approach it from an outsider's perspective, so that you can understand like how it's perceived and how you can gain a greater understanding of your own culture. Yeah, but it's also recognizing like, look, you think you think going to New York Comic Con, right?
Yeah.
It's full, 200,000 people.
There's so many people there.
Like tens of thousands of people are there every day.
Wanted to be there and couldn't get in.
Yeah, there are people who were turned away, who are going to Craigslist, spending hundreds of dollars. They can have access to a mecca of their culture or of many cultural ideas put into one place. It's interesting whenever I watch like a New York Comic Con video, whenever I'm looking for inspiration, and I find like 1,000 different ones. Like some of them are looking for just Godzilla figures, and some of them are looking for the video game presence, or some of them are looking for like actual comic books, and some of them are actually there for original prints or sketches. And there's so many different facets all in one place. But even then, when you're looking at like, then you watch ABC News cover it. Then you watch like the news vans outside of the con who are like, "Hi there, I am usually reporting on a house fire or a celebrity stupid scandal, but today I'm standing in front of what seems to be an incomprehensible amount of nerds who are dressing up as their favorite characters and going into a big sweaty building, and I don't know what they do in there because I'd never go inside of one."
Right.
Like that is so frustrating and also hilarious. It's like knowing anything about computers and then watching that hilarious video where it's like, destroy, die. These are messages on a web board, and then they show that van that explodes.
Yeah.
And it's like,
oh my god,
what was that?
Yeah, what was the point of that?
But
that's
what they're doing.
Right.
And I think that's also it's almost like a cultural version of, hey, let's diminish this one thing so that I look a little more legitimate.
Right.
Because, like, news is stupid. The news anchor idea is stupid. We've seen whenever news anchors are like, "Hi, everybody, I'm news anchor so-and-so," and then a bug crawls down their throat, and then they cough, and then they react like they normally sound, and they don't sound anything like that. And it's like, what a joke. Like, what a farce you've engineered that everyone is in on, and everyone recognizes, and yet we still, like, think that's more legitimate in some way.
Right.
But it's hard to say that without like it's hard to say that without sounding like a raving lunatic sometimes.
Right.
Where you're like, hey, this very, very simple concept is lost on you because of your perceptions.
Yes.
And it's hard to do that
right?
like all the time.
Exactly.
It's hard and it's frustrating and diminishing and exhausting to keep doing it.
Yes.
It's part of why I kind of stepped away from comics as well, is because I was like, I am sick of fighting.
That's fair.
And even within your own comic book, even within your own culture, you're fighting. I mean, like, remember when you were a Star Wars fan? I've never met a more self-hating culture in my life, and I'm a member of it.
Yeah.
Remember when it used to be like, Star Wars fans, we all love Star Wars, right? Especially Boba Fett, and then you had people who were like, Boba Fett is just a mute jackass who's like a second-rate stormtrooper that fell into a sand vagina. Fuck you, Boba Fett's overrated. And you're like, fuck you, Boba Fett's the coolest. Have you ever read the novels? Yeah, I read the novels, and I watched the holiday special. And it's like, and it's just this constant one-upsmanship. Yeah. And then the re-releases come out, and they're like, some of them are good, some of them are bad, and then the prequels come out. It's just great. Comic book fans hate each other even more than that, and it's like so frustrating where it's like there's infighting. It's like the Civil War in comics and in Marvel.
And it's like, guys, we're not look, we might have different opinions,
but outside they think we're all a bunch of chuckleheads.
Apparently, like we got to stop.
Yeah.
I have one more.
Let's hear it.
The last one I think that could
let's make that point.
Deter non-comic readers.
Yeah.
Is the cost of a comic versus the cost of a book.
Yes.
And the perceived amount you get for it.
Right. Well, because there's a lot that everyone takes for granted when you pick up a comic book.
Yes.
And it's why it's so hilarious, like, what happened with digital comics. But go ahead.
But I feel like, in particular, when you see the cost of a DC or Marvel trade, and what you're getting for what they're perceiving you're getting, as opposed to picking up a paperback novel.
Right, you're getting like 400 pages for $12.
Exactly.
Or if you're buying it first edition, like $30.
Right, so I can imagine a non-comic book reader going into a store and someone being like, all right, you want to get into Captain America, pick up the following trades. You look at the back, it's $25 a trade. You're like, what?
I see that. I saw that every day when I worked in a comic book store.
Right.
I saw people who were like, "My cousin likes these fucking things. What does he like? What do I get?"
Yeah.
First of all, that's like walking into a video store if you went into your time machine and got into one, and then said, "My friend likes movies. Which movie do I buy?" Or walking in a library, my friend likes reading. What book should I get? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and I had people who were like, my nephew likes comic books. What should I get him? What is he like? What character is he like?
Right.
And what I do is I always cut through all that shit, so I don't have that like self-effacing discussion where it's like, you know, well, what is he like? I don't know. What have you? You know, I just go, what superheroes on his T-shirts? You know what I mean? Like, what does he have on his wall? Like, what favorite movies does he have? Like, I just cut through that so I can make a legitimate recommendation without also being like, you're a jackass.
That's fair.
But yeah, like the cost. I spent. You look at a monthly. I'm gonna spend $60 or $6 a month for one issue.
Sometimes.
I mean, 20 pages.
Yeah.
Full of ads.
Exactly.
It's like if you hate the Hulu method, I gotta spend money a month, and I get bombarded with ads. That's horseshit.
Yep.
I'm gonna spend $6 for 20 pages of content, and every other page has a bold, story-destroying ad in it.
Yeah.
Fuck you. That sucks.
Right.
And or it's like, I'm gonna get a digital copy which has no ads, and I'm gonna spend the exact same price.
Right, and part of that too is, especially if you're a non-comic reader and you are used to purchasing books for someone.
Yeah.
If you're just buying like the bestseller, right?
Yeah.
Sure, you might spend $25, right? But it's usually big.
Yeah,
right? Like
you get a lot of story,
but
maybe.
You're probably not considering the paper quality.
Yep.
And the cost of printing.
Yes.
Now, of course, some comics I feel like they're still overcharging, but a comic book in full color is going to be way more expensive.
Yeah.
Than a novel.
Well, because they don't
print,
and they take it for granted. They're like, okay, so to make a novel happen, as I've experienced, because I know people who are in the publishing industry.
Right.
You write the story. You have at least 2 editors. You have an editor in chief, and they get that. And you have a marketing department. You have cover artists, multiple artists who create a cover. But like when you create a comic book, you write it.
Yep.
You draw it.
Yep.
Which is 2 completely different things that
right.
create that are completely
right.
Equal amounts of effort.
Exactly. And
then you have the inker.
Yes.
And you have the colorist.
Yep.
You have the letterer.
Yep.
You have the cover artist. You have the printing. You have the binding.
And
you have the marketing.
And you forgot your editor.
Yeah, and you forgot the editing as well. And you have multiple editors on there.
Yes.
To produce a single issue of like a 20-page comic book that comes out a month, it costs a ridiculous amount. Our book, Garth Kirby and the Cookbook of the Gods, is 44 pages. I don't mind saying how much it costs. I think it cost about $5,000 to produce.
Yep.
And I paid myself $0 to create the concept and write it 1,000 times. I had to write like 12 different copies of it because I was like, that script doesn't work, or these sorts. So then you got to find an artist that matches your art, and then you got to find somebody and you have to pay them a fair rate, a competitive rate, and you can work that down. But like that's me. Yeah. I spent $5,000 to make a 44-page comic. Have that? Sure, maybe you could work it down to like $3,000 to $2,000 per issue. That's nuts,
right?
And I had no marketing team. I had no editor. I had and my artist was also I had a letterer. I had a letterer. I had an inker. I had a colorist. And I paid all those people, so it probably was more than $5,000 all said and done. Because when I first produced it, and I had to pay for printing. You know what I mean? Like there was a lot that goes into making a comic book that everybody takes for granted. You pick up a comic, no, the art sucks. Like today, I picked up Batman, and there's an image of a double-page splash of Gotham City at nighttime, and like you take it for granted because you feel like you've seen Gotham City at nighttime 1,000 times, but like. Don't forget, this motherfucker drew Gotham!
Yeah.
And it's 2 pages worth. Probably took him like 2 weeks to draw this damn 2-page splash. And it's not even the action. It's just a moment to take in. Yep. Just to create a moment. Just to elicit that reaction that Gotham Girl's having looking over Gotham for you. Like, for you just take that in and you take it immediately for granted. I don't mean you specifically. I just mean like, and we take it for granted as readers. We take it for granted as reviewers. And they take it for granted as outsiders who are like, and that's just for children anyway.
Right, exactly.
And what kind of and by the way, just to take the piss out of those people in one other regard. Can you imagine going to a bookstore and being like, the puppy lost his way. What a piece of shit. Fuck this asshole. Like, how long did it take to draw these silly ass images of the puppy and the kid? He doesn't even look like a kid. He looks like an alien kite. Like, this is stupid. You know, how long did it take to make this damn thing? Every page has one sentence on it.
Right.
It must take him like a weekend. You know, like, what a diminishingly arrogant and short-sighted way to approach. Take your criticism of any genre and then apply it to the thing that you love, and
right,
and think about it for a minute, and it hopefully will put into perspective. But
right.
yeah, like it's a constant battle, poking through that barrier and saying like, hey,
yeah,
this is something that's valuable. I know, and being like, I know. And and you see it actually, you know, with the superhero genre or the comic book movie, which they don't call anymore. You know, some would say, and I'm not going to say this is my opinion. I'm not going to give you my opinion about Warner Brothers and their approach to the DCEU, which I think they should just call the DCU. But whatever. The expanded universe. That's like Star Wars expanded universe. Like,
right, but
those
that way
novels.
they don't have to call it comics. Neither of the two
No.
have anything to do with comics in there.
No, they don't. But so Warner Brothers has been like, I got to do these superhero movies. Damn it. Like, I don't know. Like, they're constantly apologizing for having to do this thing. I don't think Suicide Squad is like not an apology. That is
no.
Like, look at this.
And also, I don't think anyone beyond those who know about comic books would even know that.
Right. But you still see it, and you see it on the highest level, and you see it in the lowest level. You see it with people who don't even know what comic books are.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, you know.
I also want to mention. Have you ever noticed that whenever you're trying to recommend a book for a non-comic reader who's maybe into literature, for the most part, people go to indie.
Yes. Oh
Which
my God.
I think is so funny because everyone's like, yeah, indie.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like,
yeah, in the comic book world, we're like, indies. Yeah, but like, I saw people who bitching about indie comics where they're like, these are just movie pitches. I'm sick of these movie pitches being in my world, and I'm like, like they're not all movie pitches, man.
They're not all.
Like, you know what? Every comic book is a movie pitch. It's just not. Some of them are totally untranslatable to movies.
Right.
But yeah, like, you know what? Like, some of them are, but don't, like, you know.
People are like Sandman, Why the Last Man, you know.
Yeah,
like
Why the Last
Saga.
Man. They've been trying to make Why the Last Man a movie forever.
But I'm just saying, like, those are things you recommend to people who don't read.
Yes.
Like, hey, what are you into? Well, I'm into this, that, and the other thing. Well, I got an indie book for you.
Right, exactly.
Like,
what
here's your
movies do you
gateway
like?
into comics.
Yeah, here's Descender. You know, like,
yeah.
Here's something that is not a cape and cowl like comic.
Right? It's just, I always find it to be so ironic.
But I deliberately, sometimes I'll deliberately be like, here's a Spider-Man comic for you.
Right.
Because I think it will blow your mind. And then look at the year that it came out and it'll even blow your mind even more. Because you'll be like, because I have people who, you know, they're like, Craven's Last Hunt, they're like, they were making this shit in 87?
Right.
Like, this is a thing. Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, DeMatteis writing, like, you know, higher art? I don't know. He was writing, like, more cerebral superhero stories during like a time when like Secret Wars came out, which is like, hit them hard and fast, folks. We gotta get these hard light image constructs before Doctor Doom takes the power from the Beyonder to destroy all of reality. Like, fucking, all right. I mean, like, people like Hickman, you know, Hickman was like, let's take that silly idea of like, like the universe and make it like soberingly like harsh.
Yeah.
Like, I had to quit New Avengers after a while because I was like, I'm sick of watching my superheroes turn into monsters and world destroyers. Doctor Strange's like, I must sell my soul, and I'm and then they're like, you did already, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah, but you know, I think why people recommend indie is, again, it's that self-contained world.
Yeah.
You don't walk into the comic book store and like, all right, go pick out like a Spider-Man over there.
Yeah.
And like,
oh, just in our Off the Rack episode about that one about Spider-Man 17, people were like, what?
Yeah.
People who aren't reading Spider-Man are like, what is happening with Peter Parker?
Right.
I'm like, well, you'll have to be reading for the last 5 years, but it's a hell of a ride.
Right? Yeah, so like I can understand that too, because like if you dare to enter a comic book store as a non-comic reader, you're going to be smacked in the face with continuity.
Yes.
Which is something that is loved by comic book fans for the most part.
And is elusive and frustrating and alienating for non-comic book readers.
Right.
Or for those coveted new readers.
The new readers, which apparently don't care about comics at all.
Yeah, the new readers are just like, if they are legitimately new readers, then like they're reading.
They're reading. But these new readers are like, I don't understand comics. This is weird. I would prefer a book.
Yeah, like, fuck you. You're not a new reader. You're a detractor of the medium. That said, by the way, solution to to the problem with new readers and continuity: make the books available. Make them available. I like it is so frustrating that like while the tradification of comics has permeated our culture to the nth degree, where like the first 6 issues of this run are available. Oh, thank you, but it's a 12-issue run. Well, but then I wouldn't be able to get $20 from you next time.
Right?
Like, fuck you. But make everything available, and not just in those omnibuses where it's like cheap print, cheap paper, and it's black and white. Like, no, put them out and treat them like you would with new books. Like, give them the prestige, like nice, clean, like streamlined cover. Get them out there.
Yeah, make it look modern. Make it look
especially
appealing.
with Marvel, where it's like it's all one story. It's all started from one place. Make it happen. Make it all so that's like I could go back here, and you could. I don't know. You're the publisher, man. Figure it out. But like, make it. You could make it where it's like you could color code the eras or something like that,
who knows,
or whatever. But you know, I mean, obviously, a trade paperback that's like volume 604 is going to be alienating in and of itself. But like, that's why I'm saying, like, rename them or
right, and like try, not that you can, but try to get like other areas of pop culture on board.
Yeah.
Like, try to not portray comics in, like, a crazy, confusing, or hilarious...
Well, and that takes the...
And that, I don't mean, like, shows that are comic book based. Like,
right, because The Flash does a great job of giving you what it is like to read a comic book.
Right, and I don't even mean that. I mean, like, in other shows that have nothing to do with comic books.
Yes, I know
where they mention comics, or they'll talk about comics, or they'll have a portrayal of an individual who's into comics. Like... portray, like, if you're going to do that, you got to portray the serious side of it, too.
Well, don't make comics the punchline.
Yeah. Like, that would help, too.
Bazinga. Anyway, so there you have it, everybody. That was our episode of the Elseworlds Exchange, where we just discussed, we didn't really necessarily come to a topic conclusion, necessarily. We didn't find a solution, but...
There really isn't a solution, but, like, this is... this is just kind of like, if you're a comic book fan and you have someone, if you know someone who isn't into them, this could be some of the things that could be
that you're encountering.
Yeah,
and these are some of the ideas and the stigmas that are keeping them from connecting with it. And look, the fact is there are some folk who just, there are people within our own medium who don't like indie books or don't like I loved The Max until Sam Keith was like, okay, you're reading now, I'm gonna go fucking off the wall, and I was like, I don't like your off the wall art, Keith. I liked your more literal art. So you can imagine that if we have our own qualms about our own medium, that they are gonna have issues too. Some folk are just not gonna want to read a comic book, just like there's some people who go, I don't read. You know what I mean? Like, there's some people who don't read books. I don't read. Right. You're not gonna get them.
No.
You're not going to get them to read your novel.
But if you have a friend who, like, is into, like, certain genres, like, then,
or is open-minded enough.
Like, just try to, be easy with it,
Yeah,
like,
they're
understand the fact they might be coming in with a stigma in mind.
And they don't love it like you do.
Yes.
They might one day, but they don't yet.
Exactly.
So you're gonna have to teach them.
Exactly.
Look at our episode of Back Issues where I showed my parents Dark Knight Returns. They had no idea Batman was that dark.
No.
They had no idea that there was anything like that in the culture. And remember, like, watch that episode because it's a great way of getting an idea of an outsider who also is trying to connect.
Right.
And these are my folks who were like, I want to understand. Like, my mom kept saying things like, how old were you when you read this? Like I had no idea you were reading these things, right? And it's like,
it's less about connecting and more about
I was not aware. But these are it's a fun episode because it's the most literal example of explaining a comic to two people who have no idea what's going on.
Oh yeah,
so,
absolutely. Like that's it. That's like.
Yeah,
the most true to the concept of Back Issue.
And look at like when you look at like fans or people look at people who are non-comic readers. Ethan is through and through a non-comic reader. Dude still doesn't read them. Doesn't read them. Has never encountered a book that has equaled Watchmen in his eyes.
No.
And I'm not saying that like he's closed-minded to other comics, and he's heard more than 130 stories.
Yep.
And more than half of them I've enjoyed and have tried to give him in a favorable light, and he is still like that's not for me.
No.
Like I don't appreciate it on that level.
No. There are some that I have presented that he has been interested in.
Yes.
He hasn't. I tried to loan him the oath and he left it. He forgot it.
Yeah. Well, but he does that.
But
There's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, like he leaves all kinds of things when he comes like over to the studio to shoot.
Yes.
Like he'll just leave things. But he seemed interested in that. I don't know. Like if it, again, that was a self-contained book though.
Yeah.
Self-contained. I don't know.
Oh no, he likes the self-contained stuff. But
Yeah.
but like he's never gonna buy one.
Oh God, no.
And that's just who he is.
Yeah, that's
So.
just it's not something that interests him enough to go and.
But you'll notice, like, number one, he is a quarter of the entire channel.
Yes.
And he's on a comic book show.
Yep.
And he is in no way a detractor of the medium, and you guys still enjoy him.
Yeah.
So,
Oh no, he seems to prefer the storytelling tradition.
Yes.
As opposed to the.
Yeah, he's got a soft spot for movies, and he likes video games and stuff like that.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
yeah. He'd be more inclined to play a new Mass Effect game than probably like go out and find a comic book for him. He's also like, but what's ironic is he's also his interpretation, as far as I understand it, is he's like, it's just too big. There's too many options.
Mm.
You know, it's hard to focus on one thing. Like he would need to be recommended.
Yes.
And so there you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so think about that when you're encountering people who are non-comic
Yeah.
readers. Like it is, if they are open-minded enough to even look at a comic book store, they're like, this is overwhelming.
Yes, guys, Danielle counts. To be fair, though, until I got on the couch, nobody counted me.
No, it's true. Yeah.
So
there you go.
she's my best friend, so she could just eat that.
Yeah. But, so there you go. Thanks a lot for watching this episode of Elseworlds Exchange, and if you're listening to the audio episode, thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next week with another episode of Elseworlds.
Right. Also, apparently there was a birthday, and I think we missed it.
We
I don't
did,
know
I'm
if he's
sorry.
Still here.
Happy birthday! Also, yes, happy birthday, man.
Yes.
Thank you for celebrating your birthday here on Elseworlds Exchange with us.
Yes.
And also, quick shout out to Christian from Baltimore Comic Con. I'm sorry I didn't get to meet you, man. If you're listening to this episode,
that's right.
Sorry I missed you.
Yes.
We met a whole bunch of awesome people.
I ran into him, and then I think your line had moved by the time.
Yeah.
He was done. He was on his line. But,
yeah, I'm sorry, man. But,
yeah, and by the way, thank you to every single person
who ran into us at Baltimore. It was a
Yes.
lot of fun, and it was so overwhelming to meet so many of you, and for you to express like how much you liked the channel, and
Yes.
what you liked about it, and everything like that. It really meant a lot to us, and especially thank you for giving us some books, which we'll be working on.
Yes.
That's a lot of fun. So thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and we'll see you guys next week. Also, if you are planning on going to New York Comic Con, please catch our panel on Saturday, 3 to 4 at New York Comic Con. It's the weekly poll panel.
Yeah.
So catch us there.
And also, apparently, there'll be some sort of signing?
Yes, we're going to do a signing
Question
after
mark?
that
The
panel.
Weekly Poll, though.
The Weekly Poll's doing a signing after that panel, and I think we're doing a signing at Valiant booth as well.
Who knows?
And we'll do a meet and greet on one of those days.
And the rest of ComicPOP will be floating around.
Oh yeah. Even if you don't see me, you'll see at least 2 or 3 or 4 of them.
Mm-hmm.
No, 3. Yeah. There's an epic cat battle going on the ground.
It's pretty awesome.
Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, guys. We'll see you next time. Thanks a lot. We're back.
Does it work like that?
Yeah.
What? What?
Hey, we're back. Listen. Friday, 6 p.m.
What?
Be here. Live stream. 40K. Thanks for reminding me.
We all 36 people who are left.
Damn it!
Yeah, you had 300 people.
We had 300 people. We didn't get to tell them.
And you just screwed the pooch.
I did. Anyway. Yeah. 40K special. Tell everybody. Tell all the other 200 people that were... Tell the other 300 people that just left. 40K subscriber special. Friday. This Friday. 6 p.m. Eastern Time.
That's right. That's September something?
9th.
9th. The 9th.
Yeah.
Friday, September 9th. September, like, 9/9.
Yeah, 9/9.
9/9.
See you there at 6.
Yeah.
9/9/6.
Yeah.
p.m. Eastern Time.
Now it's 23 people.
Is that more or less?
It's less.
Fuck.
Yeah.
All right, bye.
It's not Goma.